Right at 16.
I am all set.
Okay, you're all set? All right, it's 6:30 and the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education for Monday, February 27th, 2017 is called to order. Mrs. Wick, would you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney,
Present.
Mr. Uphoff, Ms. Flanagan,
Present.
Mr. Raymond,
Here.
Mr. Kraus,
Yo.
Ms. Maidson,
Yes.
Mr. Zock.
Present, the board has a quorum. Do you have the proof of notice?
I do. Right here.
I have noticed that this meeting has been properly noticed pursuant to Wisconsin open meetings law, and if anybody wants to examine the certificate, Mrs. Wick will have that.
I move approval of the agenda.
I have, oh, never mind.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening. Is there a second to that motion?
Yes.
Ms. Maidson with the second. Any discussion? I would note that we have communication from the public. We have Dane County Executive Joe Parisi here this evening, and we'll be right on first thing on the agenda as soon as we do a little bit of housekeeping. And then we have a couple action items and then information items regarding our educator effectiveness program. And then at the end of the meeting, the open session, we have a closed session where we'll finalize the superintendent's evaluation. So that's on the agenda for this evening. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries by unanimous voice vote. Number one on the agenda, section A, is the consent calendar. You will note that I have made revisions to the minutes, in particular the section regarding the public hearing. That's at your desk if you need to review those. I just wanted to formalize them, given that we'll likely, I think, Brian, be headed to DPI on that boundary issue.
I believe so.
Okay. Is there any item on the agenda that, any consent agenda that any board member wants removed? Ms. Maidson,
Yeah, I have a couple of concerns in reference to
is there any item you would like removed?
number 2.
Okay. Number 2 is removed. Any other item removed? I would submit the minutes in its revised form that's before you as part of the consent calendar without removing them. If anybody wants to remove to discuss those chambers or changes, do so.
Yeah, I'd like to have at least like 2 minutes to
Okay.
review these changes.
Got it, so I'll remove that. I need a motion then to approve the consent calendar numbers 3 through 7.
So moved.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, I would note that in those, in those topics, we have a retirement. Molly Matoma is retiring at the end of the year from Brooklyn Elementary, where she's been a physical therapist. We wish her the best, and we have a number of donations. The Splash Pad continues to receive donations in their fundraising efforts. The Acers Volleyball has donated $200 to that project, and Wisco $100. The Food Service Department received a $175 anonymous donation to pay for students who have negative food balances. The In Spirits and Nancy Riggs have a matching donation to Mrs. Anderson's 4th grade class at Netherwood Knoll in the total amount of $600. And Youth Baseball has established a $500 scholarship under criteria that's appropriate under district policy and review. So we thank them for their donations.
One other donation.
Yes, ma'am. Can I have your name, please?
Yes, Linda McIsaac, former superintendent of schools. I have agreed to a donation of all of our assessment and all of our tools to the Oregon schools. We use them nationwide to help our people that are in school, that want to build their confidence, want to know more about the natural abilities that they are born with. And we use them in prison. We've been using them for the past 6 years in the state of Wisconsin, as well as our workforce centers. And what I don't want to interrupt your discussion, I put a passcode in there for each of you to experience it yourself. Figure out what your innate abilities are. Our kids need to know who they are and a career direction. And also our soft skills courses are in there. I will donate all of that to the school district, and we're ending the school year, so I know that we need to move as well. And I'm sure that you will find the assessment interesting, as well as the courses. And there is no conflict of interest. I don't do business here or anything else. And my phone number and email is on there. I don't want to take time away from Joe, but I'm happy to have you email me questions or anything that you want to discuss.
Okay, so this is for our consideration and your offer for time.
Correct.
Great, well, I'll work with Brian on this and get back to you, and the board will have the opportunity to review it, and thank you for providing us with this
And I
information.
know we
Linda.
talked already,
I learned that. Good to
Brian.
see you again.
Okay. Great, Janie, would you call the roll, please, because we have a resignation.
Okay. Mr. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Kraus.
Yes?
Ms. Maidson.
Yes.
Ms. Feeney.
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. Zak.
Yes, those items 3 through 7 on the consent calendar are approved by unanimous roll call vote. Dan, have you had a chance to look at the minutes?
Just the things in yellow are changed.
Yes.
Yep.
Is this because it's gonna go to DPI? Is that what you said?
Yes, I formalized it.
Yes, I've had time to look at it, thank you.
Okay. Need a motion to approve the minutes as revised?
I move to approve the minutes as revised.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are, of the February 13th meeting are approved. Ms. Mason, you asked for the approval of payments to be removed.
Yes. I had two concerns in reference to the approval of payments, and they will be found on page 1. About 2/3 down, could the Peloton Consultant Group, I did not have opportunity to ask about this beforehand, and I was just concerned about what that is,
I can actually answer that.
because it's 4 days of a lot of money.
For the last 3 years, we've had administrators and school staff from across Dane County participating in adaptive schools training. And the Peloton Consulting Group is the name of a group of 3 or 4 different Madison School employees that have provided this training for us. And we just finished, I think this is our last payment to the group for our final 2-day training. This year, we probably had less than 15 of the 50 people participate. And Leslie and I have put this together for school districts, and it's a cost-effective way for us to do training for our staff. Adaptive Schools is based on a book of training, and we have found a partnership way to put it together, in that we collect the money as a fiscal agent, charge the districts, and then make a payment to the consulting group.
Oh, so there's money coming in to pay for that $12,000?
Yes. Yes.
That makes sense, thank you. And then the second one on there was, right underneath that is the cleanup and repairs to the PAC. Is that finished?
No.
Okay. Is there an estimated cost then?
It's still in the bidding process.
Okay,
Yeah, I think what you see here is the Perfection Cleaning and Restoration. And Andy, that's the group that we in the insurance company hired to clean up after the fire immediately.
It's the company that was recommended by the insurance company that we
Okay.
hired
That's
to
all.
do the initial cleaning.
But that is not anywhere near the total cost of that project.
Right,
This was to get us in school, get us back in school,
ASAP. right.
yes, the
Thank you.
next couple of days.
All right, I need a motion to approve the vouchers for payments.
I move approval of the vouchers for payments.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those are approved. We're moving on to section B. Board Policy 18004 provides the community with the opportunity to come before the board to address matters of relevance. Is there any member of the public registered with you, Janie?
No.
Is there anybody, a member of the public who wishes to address the board this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to number C, information items, OEA report. Is there any member of the OEA who wishes to address the board this evening? Don't see anyone here. Student report, I understand Tessa's on her way back from Chicago on a field trip, so she's not going to be here, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and that leads us to our special guest this evening, and that's Dane County Executive Joe Parisi. Welcome to our board meeting, Joe.
Thanks, Rick.
I think Brian's going to frame your conversation first, and then the floor will be yours. We have it as an information item tonight, but when you're done presenting, the board will have the opportunity to ask you some questions if they have them. Okay, go ahead,
I
Brian.
am not going to steal Dane County Executive Parisi's thunder, but in front of you, board members, you have a single one-page summary of the Building Bridges program, and you'll recall from our administrative recommendations and some information that our mental health task force has shared with you over time, the importance of a program like this. And this year we were delighted to be accepted into the Dane County program, and we're going to be working as partners. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to County Executive Parisi to share his view of this project and some work that he has done with other school districts. And also, before I do that, I just want to make sure and thank Dane County for reaching out to us with this. When we work together as partners and we use resources in a productive way, we can accomplish so much more and provide better services for kids. So I know you will get a round of applause when you get wrapped up, because we are so excited as a school district to increase our services for mental health.
Floor is yours, Joe.
Thank you very much. Well, likewise to you, thank you so much. I wanted to come by tonight to thank the district for partnering with us on this issue that's, important to us all. I thought I'd give you just I don't want to take up your whole meeting, just a brief background on how this program came together, and then answer any questions that I'm able that you might have. The idea for this started a few years ago when I was visiting Verona, actually, one of our Joining Forces for Families offices. That's our decentralized way that we deliver human services, county human services. We partner with local communities, with law enforcement, with schools. And I was meeting with one of our workers and some school staff and law enforcement, and I said, what's the number one challenge you're facing? And to a T, every one of them said challenges with mental health in our schools, and when a mental health crisis or issue arises, not always having the resources needed to address it properly, and unfortunately sometimes having to turn to law enforcement when there's a mental health crisis, when it would be much better for everyone involved to be able to turn to a mental health practitioner. And this was the opinion of law enforcement, the schools, and everyone involved. So we started looking for ways that we could partner to address this, because obviously the schools have their job and have limited resources and do an incredible job with the resources you have, but you need partners in the community. And what county government does, half of our entire budget is human services. And so we came up with the idea of the Building Bridges program, which is a two-person mental health team that is in a school catchment area, that is there for a number, to work with school staff and others in a number of different ways. First of all, if there is a mental health crisis in a school, if a child is going through a mental health crisis, to be someone that can be immediately turned to come in and help de-escalate a situation, help that young person, and help that young person get connected to services so that they can get better, so that they can get the help they need, and to reach out to the families and involve the families and connect the young person to direct services and services in the community. And also, beyond that, working with school staff and working with young people who are maybe not going through a crisis at the time, but maybe there's the young people who are suffering from depression, from anxiety, and maybe sometimes these symptoms don't even go noticed for what they are. These teams will work with staff to help identify those challenges and then reach out to those young people, reach out to those families to make sure that they have access to the services that they need in order to get better. And what we've done is we've designed it in a way that it's not the county providing the direct services. We did an RFP and we're working with Catholic Charities to do this. And the way we do it, as the superintendent mentioned, is by partnering, because we all have limited resources. The schools have limited resources, the county has limited resources, but when we can find mutual areas of need and partner, we can make our money go a lot further. So this is a 50-50 match. Each team cost, for an entire year, cost $120,000, so $60,000 from the district, $60,000 from the county. And we started with a pilot a few years back after that first meeting in Sun Prairie, Verona, and then the city of Madison. And the feedback we got was immediately so incredibly positive from the school staff everywhere we had these teams that we made this a priority to be able to expand it as we had the dollars to do so. And so over the last couple of years, we've expanded it by a couple of districts a year. Until this year now, we're in basically every district across the county. I believe it's 12 teams that has expressed an interest in working with us. And some of the smaller districts have partnered. Wisconsin Heights partners with Middleton Cross Plains so that they can get services. And then some of the larger districts can handle a two-person team like Oregon. And then we go it alone with those districts. So again, I'm really excited to be able to partner with you. It's just great that you recognize this and you're willing to put what our limited resources that you have into this partnership. And so thank you very much. I know that people are probably pretty much aware of the program, but I wanted to stop by just to make sure and see if you had any questions. And even if questions come up later, I want to make sure that everyone's comfortable, picking up the phone and being in touch with us and having a dialogue, because we obviously all have the same end goal in mind. We want to help our kids succeed.
Brian or any member of the administrative team have anything to share or add to what Joe has told about the Dane County program? Candace, come on up.
This is one of the gap areas that we identified through our committee, the level 3 tier of services for the really severe students. Mental health issues that it has been a gap for us, and so this is a really great opportunity, we believe, to meet some needs that we haven't been able to do as good a job as we'd like to with. So I think it's a really great opportunity and appreciate the county's efforts to bring us in.
Thanks, Candace. Brian, we're working with our 17-18 budget. That's going to be a component of our budget then to fund
Yes,
our
it will.
share of this?
Yeah, our initial plan is to fund it out of the allocation that the board established a few years ago for mental health. We're also having a conversation, and just started that conversation today. One of the smaller districts in Dane County is looking to buy maybe a day, and we may partner with the Deerfield School District and sell off a day, which is exactly what we want to do, stretch our resources and also give them an opportunity to participate as well. So it will be part of the 16-17 school year, 17-18 school year, because it will start this next year. But we wanted to give you a little foreshadow, and we have the money that you've provided to us in mental health funding is really where our investment will go.
Great. Any board members have any questions for Joe? Dan?
Joe, thanks, it's a great program. I don't know how you can do it, and my question is how long are we expected to be able to do this together with the county? Is there any time limit years wise? And just practically, how can you afford 2 full-time healthcare professionals for $120,000? That seems really low.
It's, literally, how do we get that? It's, by partnering with Catholic Charities, and one of the workers is a master's level and one is a bachelor's level. and that's the recommendation of how they work, you know, together the best, and that's what it costs for the time they put in. So, you know, this is what they do. They're really, we have a lot of partnerships with Catholic Charities. They're a good nonprofit. They really know their stuff. And, you know, as far as, you know, the county allocating our resources, again, I think this is one of those areas where, as you know, we never have extra money, but when we have our dollars, we have to look at where we can get the biggest bang for the buck. And we know that working with young people when they have with mental health challenges, you get a lot of bang for the buck. That's prevention. And then when we can find districts to partner, then all of a sudden, obviously, $120,000 costs us each $60,000. So it's prioritizing.
So how long are we expecting that this might be a partnership?
Well, I hope that this, you know, remains a core service. As long as there's a need, I think that this is one of those services that we should be involved in as a county, because, as I said, I approach educating our kids from a holistic viewpoint, that the schools obviously have their role and have the main role, but you can't do it all yourself. And when I look at the good of the greater community and what people in our community need, these young people need this support. So I think this is, you know, exactly one of the places that county government should be, and I'm certainly committed to keeping it going as long as possible.
Thanks.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. This was a high priority on our board's list, is to address mental health, and we've done it, but, you know, you can always do more, so thank you very much. I honestly am unfamiliar with Catholic Charities, not being involved with that community.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit? And within the mental health process, is that, is there any, it's more, is the approach secular then?
Yeah, I mean, it's they do work just like, you know, many of the other nonprofits, Lutheran Social Services, Journey Mental Health, you know, all the different, it's not, you know, they deliver the services that we ask them to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And we work with them. They'll be running our Homeless Day Resource Center. They do a lot of counseling, a lot of other charity work. Some of your folks, you know, may have worked with them on other projects, but we've had nothing but great results with them.
Thank you.
Anything to work with?
That's all I had.
Okay, Krista, you anything? Jeff or Barb? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. As Gwen said, you know, we've had a mental health task force for several years here, looking at that, exploring that area, just because we come to the same conclusion as you did. And so this was on a need list, and you walked in at a great time for us. And so we're glad that the offer's there, and we're glad that we have the resources to match it. And so you can expect us to start working forward with that in our budget this year. We appreciate that you took the time to come to Oregon to talk to us.
Oh, anytime.
Yep.
Come back to something.
Great, thank you very much.
And this is gonna be really good for our
Yeah.
kids.
Yes.
Yeah, next time you come, we'll be in our new digs, and
All
so you
right.
won't have the labyrinth to get around to, so.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to action items D, consideration of canceling our March 27th, 2017 meeting, and typically we do this if we have a meeting during spring break, which that happened, so I'd entertain a motion to approve canceling that meeting.
So moved.
Chris was wondering whether everybody wants to meet on the 27th. Is there a
I'm
second?
hoping not, but.
Is that a second to that motion? Have a motion to cancel the March 27th, please. Jeff makes the second. Any discussion? Dan?
It's my understanding that when we changed the procedures in our, I don't know if it's handbook, it's basically the school board procedures, 180, I think it was, policy. We had said that the second meeting of the month is not a mandatory meeting, so I'm not sure that it's necessary that we vote to cancel. I don't think that there's anything wrong to having a vote to cancel that meeting, but my understanding of the policy is that that meeting is not automatically set without it being scheduled otherwise.
We'll look into that. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, Why don't you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes?
Ms. Maidson?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Gonna be okay there?
I think so.
Okay. I'm gonna do all voice votes from now on. Okay. Jeff, from item, so we won't have a meeting until, now our next meeting is, actually, it wasn't the March 27th meeting, it was the February. No, it is March 27th, yeah, that's right. Our next meeting is March 13th. So, number 2, Jeff, from Visioning Committee, Charter on Youth Sports and Athletics Task Force. Floor is yours.
Yeah, on behalf of the Vision Steering Committee, I move approval of the charter for the Youth Sports and Athletics Task Force. Unfortunately, I was gonna say it's in your packet to review, but I don't have it in mind. Do other people have it? You got it?
Yep.
Awesome, okay.
And red.
I'm not gonna go into specifics about the purpose and goals of the charter since it's already spelled out in the attachment tonight. Just in summary, it's to improve communication and cooperation between the school district and youth sports, thank you, in Oregon. And it passed Vision Steering Committee on a vote of 4-0.
So that I will interpret as a motion coming from the Vision Steering Committee, which does not need a second. Are there any questions about this, Gwen?
I was on the, I'm on the visioning committee, and one thing that I think is implied but not stated, and I just wanted to clarify it, Jeff, is that one of the topics that needs research is inclusion of current research from the American Pediatrics Association and from the medical profession concerning youth sports. And when things are implied, sometimes they need to be stated so that it's not forgotten. And I'm just concerned that it's not on here.
Yeah, I believe this also came up at the
Yes, it
committee
did.
meeting.
Right,
And,
and it's included as on page 2, in terms of responsibilities, it's to gather additional relevant research on topics and to review all literature prior to the meeting. So
Right,
that would
and-
be where that would come in. And
Okay.
the
That's-
concern was if we would try to enumerate all the areas for research, we'd have a pretty long task force charter.
Well, that's where I put my notation, was gather additional relevant research on topics, but like I said, some of the research that's coming in is new and concerning and has nothing to do with anything except medical. And I'm just hoping that that doesn't get pushed aside.
yeah,
Well, we've got a co-chair here in Krista, so I'm assuming she will,
It will not.
Excellent.
she will move that onto her topic agenda. Anything else for Jeff or the Vision Committee? Okay, we've got a motion coming from Visioning. Janie, you'll have to call the roll again on this
Okay.
one.
Mr. Raymond?
yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes?
Ms. Maidson?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes, motion carries 6-0, and we have a task force that will engage in a year-long study of youth sports and athletics in the district. I will work with Brian and others to populate that task force, so if anybody has any suggestions, see me afterwards or send me an email. Okay, moving on to agenda item E, committee reports from policy. Anything, Barb?
No, just to say that we're meeting on March 14th, which is a week later than usual, and we'll be discussing the acceleration policy, number 336, and the school lunch program, number 731.
Great, thank you. Vision
What
steering.
time on that?
Go ahead,
4:30.
March 14th.
Thanks.
Jeff, visioning.
We met last week Wednesday and discussed the same 3 topics that we've been talking about for a while. And those were the youth sports task force, potential changes to school day and calendar, and transportation changes for 17-18 school year. The next meeting is scheduled for March 15th, so that will be back on the third Wednesday schedule. And the agenda for that meeting has not yet been put together, so stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to F, informational items. We have an update on educator effectiveness implementation. And Leslie, are you going to start off with this one?
I sure can.
Okay, and this arose out of discussions we had at the state school board conference where a few of us saw a presentation on this, and I talked with Leslie, who was also there, and felt that this would be a really good presentation for the board to see regarding the implementation efforts with respect to the state's educator effectiveness plan, because there's some great developments at the state level through DPI, and they tie in nicely with what we've been doing in terms of assessment in our district. So Leslie, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And we'll go through, and then when afterwards we'll turn it over to questions from the board.
Okay, so much as Steve mentioned, this really isn't a tutorial on the educator effectiveness process in and of itself. It isn't that at all. Actually, it's more about DPI and their journey through educator effectiveness and how it really has brought DPI and the Oregon School District much closer to their approach. And I called it a marrying of the minds. So back in 2014, this was the definition that DPI was using for educator effectiveness. So you can see that it was lengthy, and it had words like evaluation, fair, valid, reliable, multiple measures, etc. And I'm going to show you toward the end of the presentation what their definition is now, because I think you'll be able to see quite an evolution. And the evolution wasn't just because people at DPI were learning and growing as professionals, although I'm certain they were. It's really because the original educator effectiveness process resulted from a waiver from No Child Left Behind. And along with that waiver were certain requirements of things that they had to do as part of their evaluation, or at that time they called it part of their accountability system. So there were pieces in educator effectiveness that were a must due to the waiver. And that has simply changed. Consequently, DPI has been able to change. However, this is where they started. And you'll see their timeline goes back to 2011. And as you know, we joined in as a pilot district quite early because we knew what was happening and we wanted to be ahead of the curve on something as important as an evaluation process. And we had also adopted the Danielson framework as part of our own process even before the state brought it up. So when we finally had to do full implementation in 14-15, I feel like the Oregon School District was really quite prepared to do it, especially when you compare it to the experience of other districts who hadn't used Danielson and hadn't been a part of the pilot. So originally, when we were trained on educator effectiveness, particularly through the pilot component, this is a piece that I took out of a recent PowerPoint, but this is part of how teachers were supposed to be earning scores. Half of it was through their practice, half of their score, and then part of the score was state assessment results, which I never could figure out, and apparently they couldn't either because it's now gone, how you would connect a particular individual to state assessment results. District assessments such as school-wide reading growth and graduation rates, the student learning objectives, or SLOs, as you've heard us speak of them many times, and then a sliver there for district choice. Oh, and actually one of the small slivers is also graduation rate. So there were a lot of pieces that were really complicated, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the pieces were there because they were required as part of the waiver. Well, before they actually implemented in 14-15, they took a lot of feedback from the people who were in the pilot, and they did as much trimming of the system as they possibly could. But it still was a system in which teachers earned scores, right? So they had a score for teacher practice, and they had a score, or part of the score was on student outcomes, as you can see up there. And then for the student outcomes piece, which is their SLO, 5% of that was supposed to be value added. Now, value added was a complicated calculation, but it had to have multiple years of test scores to be able to make this calculation. So consequently, when they first rolled it out, they also had just put out, which was Smarter Balance. So they said, we can't possibly do value added this year because we don't have multiple years of assessments for you. Well, there's more to that, and I will get to that in a second. So we always spoke about value added as something that was coming in the future, but we have not yet had to work with it. As part of their pilot, they also did a couple of other really important things. They reduced the required number of SLOs from 2 to 1. They changed the SLO scoring rubric to not only talk about the outcome, but also the process the teacher used to get the outcome. Because the original rubric was, if you met your goal, you were at a 3. If you didn't, you were at a 2. So if you set a goal, a rigorous goal of something like 95%, and you were at 94, according to the rubric, you were a 2. Now, I'm not saying that we accepted any of this. I'm just saying this is the way it was at the time. And that when teachers were given an SLO score in a summary year, they changed it so that it can now be a holistic score. The evaluator can look at 3 years of SLOs and assign a score based on the whole story, where originally you were supposed to average out the three scores. So there were some really good changes. But they were really only inching closer to where we already were. Because as I went back through the presentation materials that we handed out to teachers from the very beginning, we had made a very conscious decision to use this as a tool to get better, but not as a way to assign scores. There were some things we had to do because they were part of the system, but they were not what we were emphasizing, and they were not the attitude that we were taking towards this particular process. We also talked from the very beginning that we were putting the process people used and making that at least as important as the result, because we thought that the learning process that the teachers used to get the student results was very, very important also. We also said from the very beginning that a 4 on a teacher practice rubric was something that we should strive for, but it wasn't the expectation for every component. We said sort of like 4 is an island that we visit, but it's very difficult to live there permanently. So when people already had increased anxiety over the implementation of the new system, knowing that we weren't expecting this super high level 4 for absolutely everything the first time out, I think was helpful. We always put the emphasis on our learning, not our score. And our training emphasized how to write a quality SLO. As a matter of fact, that was about 75% of our training. And then, as you also know, we made the decision not to use this as part of our educator compensation plan. Now, I'll give you an example. This was from the August 2016 new teacher orientation. And this was before some of the even more recent changes that DPI had made that I'll get to in a minute. But it was a slide that was showing the new teachers what exactly did we think of the purpose of educator effectiveness was. So you can see right now, there isn't anything in there about a score, right? It's about focusing on student results, connecting teaching to learning, improving our practices, and helping inform school improvement overall. So if you look at this and you think back to that definition that DPI had in 2014, you can see that we consciously took a very different path, while still being compliant with DPI regulations. And, you know, the value added question was still out there. There still wasn't an answer on when value added was coming, although the answer came very soon after that. And you can see over here the 95% and the 5%. That was what a teacher evaluation would look like with value added component at the 5%. But a principal, 45% of his or her score was supposed to be value added. So, in Secondary Education Act, they knew it wasn't going to be a part of the reauthorization. So they purposely really put the brakes on the value added piece expecting that with the reauthorization it would go away, and it did. So it's value added is no longer a component of the educator effectiveness system. And you can see over here, 2014, all the words that I told you about before. If you go onto the DPI's website right now in 2017, that is their definition of educator effectiveness. A system designed for and by Wisconsin educators to support the continuous improvement of educator practice that leads to improved student learning. You can see that's a significant difference from 3 years previous. Because here they had No Child Left Behind constraints that made it a system about evaluating and scoring. Where now it's a system that is about the learning process. So you can see DPI's 2017 definition and what we had used with new teachers in 2016. So without even knowing that this was the direction, we are now, as you can see, pretty closely aligned. So the way DPI speaks about it now is about it's really supposed to be about the learning process. And so the circular component is the visual, beginning of the year SLO, mid-year, end of year, and how there's a collaborative component to the whole thing, that you're looking at, you're learning and you're implementing strategies to achieve goals, you're checking for progress, and you're adjusting your strategies. Makes a lot of sense, right? As a matter of fact, it makes so much sense that it's exactly the same thing we've been talking about for the foundation of our learning sequences, once again, without even knowing it. Because for the learning sequences that we're developing, we're talking about taking our new learning, trying it in the classroom, analyzing evidence, getting feedback, reflecting, and deciding what's sustainable. So it's really the same process, which is probably why we've also been discussing our learning sequences to be a part of our professional practice goal, or to be our professional practice goal, which is another part of the educator effectiveness system. So a lot of people have praised the way Wisconsin in particular has dealt with educator effectiveness. Different institutes like the Aspen Institute and the Council of Chief School Officers, Slate.com, the LA Times, even Charlotte Danielson has had specific public praise for the way DPI is using her rubric. She did not design her rubric to be a part of an evaluation system. She designed it as a tool to assist teachers in their own learning, the path they could take to get even better at what they did. And places around the country have been using her tool very differently from that. They've even been using her tool to decide who's getting what raise, which is absolutely the opposite of her intention. Consequently, she's been really vocal about Wisconsin. But Katie Rainey, who's the head of educator effectiveness for DPI, did say that the implementation has led to several critical findings. And the first really, really important one, and why it's so important that we didn't put this into our comp plan, is that what they are finding is that using the Danielson rubric, you'll find it's statistically significant, valid, and reliable to use it for the results for individual educators. Individual educators. When you look at the critical attributes of a component and you see how individuals are improving their craft, then the process is considered to be reliable. But is not intended for and is not valid and reliable to look at it and say, this educator is better than this educator because of the score.
Those are the Danielson criteria? Yeah.
Another critical finding, there's actually several in this graphic that they put up there. And the first was really about school climate and the importance of trust, teacher to teacher, teacher to administrator, and the importance of the implementation process. If people put it out there like, oh, this is just one mandate that we have to get through, that's exactly how teachers treated it. And so the way that the leadership of district and schools went forward with implementing it pretty much could predict the results of how it would be implemented. And then also the fact that it was really important that the principals were trained and continue to be trained on using the rubric. That's the evaluator credibility piece. Another thing they found out was the importance to implementation and giving teachers time to work on the SLO. And now if you had the climate pieces, the resource pieces, the accuracy and credibility and usefulness of the process, then you ended up with something that was useful and productive. So, you know, this is something that I had on a slide for new teachers this year too. If you believe that it's a hoop jumping exercise mandated by the state, or if you believe it's a process to support your improvement, either way you are right. Because it will be what you think it is. But people are heavily influenced by what approach their school and their school district takes, and the resources and access to resources that they're given. So one of the things that I think it's important to wind up the whole thing with is to talk about, we have a lot of supports. From the beginning, we have paid people at each building a stipend to be an educator effectiveness coach, and they do excellent work. They meet with teachers, they have blogs to keep teachers updated on what's happening and at what point they should be at in their cycle. Our full release mentor is really important in new teachers and helping them understand the cycle. And she's actually created documents for them to use as part of their evaluation. If they follow all of the new teacher program pieces, that alone helps them show proficiency in the professional responsibilities domain. So she has taken a lot of ownership for that piece of it. We work really hard to keep each administrator at 12 evaluations. Now, some people go a few over, but usually it's their choice because they can't stand to not do it because they feel like they want to work with their teachers in this way because they can see how important it is. But every year at administrative workshop, district administrators take on evaluations in order to keep building administrators at 12. Because you don't want to have people do so many that they are overwhelmed and it's not something that's quality. The discussions between the principal and the educator should be high quality, deep, rich discussions about student learning. And if someone has 25 evaluations to do, that's unlikely to happen. We also have reserved 1 day additional, and as I mentioned earlier, we're considering the professional learning sequences to be their PPG 3 years in a running, so we can combine some of these really important systems. And then we continue to have the focus on educator effectiveness as a collaborative process, a learning process. So that shows you a little bit about how DPI has changed the approach and how their approach now is very similar to the one that we took from the very beginning. So that next would be any questions that you might have about that. Yes.
For the coaches at each building, these are teachers who are teaching a full day in the classroom. And then do they get some release time to be working with teachers?
Yes, they have taken release time to be able to set up appointments with teachers. They also set up appointments with teachers during in-services, after school, and often during their preps. So they're really open to working with all of their colleagues and finding a way to make it work.
Okay, and then the full release mentor is a full-time teacher who's doesn't have classroom responsibility.
That's right. That's Colleen Christensen. She works with all of our new teachers, and through her work with the new teachers, she supports them in learning and really engaging in the educator effectiveness process.
And Leslie, is this her 6th year?
Perhaps 7th even.
7th year.
And then, so does it work with 12 evaluations a year, that every teacher is getting evaluated every 3 years?
That's right.
Okay, so the math is working out.
Plus new teachers. So
Okay.
yes. And like I said, it is our goal every year to get it 12, but you know, principals are an ambitious lot, and sometimes they sneak up to 15 or so, something, you know, but it's our goal.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what a quality SLO sounds like?
Sure. It's if you can use the sentence phrase, I will so that. Like, as a teacher, I will, and then you could say something like, I will be using conferring strategies with my 2nd grade students in order to increase their ability to make inferences as measured by, and then you'd have a measurement to them.
So there's always a metric involved?
Exactly.
Krista?
I guess it's more of a qualitative question, but how are you feeling in terms of the feeling among our educators, whether they feel it's a useful learning tool versus it's a hoop to jump through. You feel like you're moving the needle that,
Oh, I think we're moving the needle, but there are still some people who are frustrated with having to fill out paperwork. You know, and we try to minimize the paperwork as much as we possibly can. But I'd say that's still a frustration that's out there because they, you know, believe that we're doing this. Why do we always have to document everything? Which I understand that very much. But really the goal is to get this idea of thinking about student results, the impact of adult actions on the student results, measuring the impact, going back and seeing what else you need to learn, getting feedback from others. We want this just to become the way we do business so that the SLO doesn't feel like something extra. It's just how we work together as colleagues.
I guess my other question then is there a piece of this that can be reflected in our assessment reports annually? That we're looking at this system in terms of we're not always only measuring student achievement, but is there a piece that can be reflected in an assessment report about our educators? I don't know, it's just a thought.
No, that's an interesting thought. And actually, either the goal itself has to have a literacy or math component, or one of the action strategies beneath your goal has to include some type of literacy strategy. So everybody, no matter what you teach, has a little bit of a literacy piece in there. So thinking about how to put that into our student achievement reports would be an
Or if
interesting
it's having an
puzzle.
impact on student achievement. You know, I don't know, just a thought.
I have two comments. First of all, teachers and feedback. When I was teaching, I hosted a lot of student teachers, and we went through a lot of feedback with them. And I personally, I think it's good to hear feedback. And I think the frustration in what you were saying is the paperwork sometimes, when your teachers are overwhelmed with paperwork anyway. But with all that being said, feedback throughout your career is always welcome, as far as I'm concerned. It just matters how you look at it. The other thing is I wanted to say that I've sat in on Colleen Christensen's meetings with the mentor thing. Oh my gosh, she is good. So, you know, she's amazing. And I think that we're very fortunate to have her, and she runs a really good ship there.
Anything else, Gwen?
No, I think this is good. I get confused with acronyms all the time, so.
Sorry, they're so much a part of my regular life.
I understand
Sometimes
that,
I
and it's a
forget.
vocabulary of education, and I
Sorry
should
about
know
that.
that, but I never do well with acronyms, no matter what the subject matter.
Dan, anything?
Thanks. Sounds like DPI and OSD are following the same path here, or we perhaps are even leading the way with our thoughts, and they're picking that up.
I'd
through the
love to say they learned
telepathy.
something from us, but I'm not so sure about that. I think it's
They're
just
probably
unfortunate.
not studying us, but they're
No.
catching the vibe because we know what we're doing over here.
We were one of the pilot districts, though, right? Yeah, so that gave us an in a little bit.
So, and it's gone in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. That's good. Have you thought about or discussed the use of leading educators to help with implementation of this system? Because to me, it sounds like 12 a year can be a lot, especially if you're working with perhaps two who may need a lot of help in the same year. Can you comment on that?
Sure. In order to be able to conduct the evaluations, you have to have an administrative license through DPI, and you also have to pass a training. It's actually very, very rigorous. It was a really intense training that we have to repeat again this summer. So unfortunately, unless a leading educator also had an administrative license, we wouldn't be able to use them in that manner.
Thanks.
Anything else, Dan?
No.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. When we walked out of that presentation in Milwaukee, we were smiling quite a bit because there was some congruity between what we were doing in DPI, and it was a relief. How much of this have you shared with our educators that we have evolved and this is where the system's evolving?
Well, I haven't, because I really hadn't thought about our parallel journeys very much until that particular presentation.
Yeah, this
And
was
now
so
this
good.
might be interesting.
This was so good then, and it's just concise and informative that
It might be worth another round to staff meetings.
Sure, okay. The thing that struck me was the parallel path that this is taking with our educators and that which we're taking in terms of assessment of students. I mean, they're right in line moving away from an averaging numerical number to a holistic view of growth and experience.
Right.
So I hope we keep in both of those areas moving, because that's pretty central to where we're moving in terms of a learner center type of system. And along that lines, when Brian and Jeff and I met with Jim Rickabaugh last week to explore a little bit about visioning steps for the future and his role in this book, the Levers book. One of the things that he said, and he says in the book, and I think it's reaffirmed in some of the books you've given me from Hattie, is that when we do evaluations in a classroom, it's important not to focus on what the teacher is doing, but what the student is experiencing in their experience, because that flips the way you look at it, both from the teacher and the evaluator, from a focus on the teacher to a focus on the student and ways to move forward. It was pretty fascinating as we move the paradigm to that, and that's what I'm seeing is we're focusing more on what the students are learning and informing practice by them, as opposed to an evaluation strictly of teacher performance. Okay.
Yes.
So, that's really good, and I think you'll start hearing more of that as we move forward with visioning and our work with Jim Rickabaugh in that line. Any other comments before we let Leslie go? Great, thanks so much, Leslie. The next item is teacher compensation update, and Gina, this is you?
This is me.
Okay, and you're gonna do a PowerPoint?
I am. Jamie has the handout for me.
You're gonna- Okay, so I'm gonna move again, but the floor is yours, Gina.
Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you for having me here tonight to talk about this and give you an update, because this has been really, really exciting the past few months, so I'm happy to talk about it. So in terms of tonight, what I wanted to talk about is our teacher compensation referendum and how it's helped us with retention, how it's helped us really focus our professional development sequences, how it's impacting recruitment, and to let you know that, of course, things are always changing, so we have some things to keep in mind in the future, and then I'd like to open it up for questions at the end. Okay. So in terms of retention, we had 318 educators this year that were impacted by our new pay schedule, and all of those educators received at least a $1,500 increase, as well as the 5 additional days for professional development. In terms of placement, how we handled that from an HR perspective is we sent letters to everyone that were drafts in terms of their initial placement, because if you remember, we have a 3-year implementation cycle. So we wanted to make sure that everyone understood where they would be placed at least the next 3 years. And we called them drafts on purpose because we wanted to give educators a chance to understand the placement, to correct any errors that we might have, and then to finalize at the end. So everyone received an initial letter, and then I offered to meet individually with educators to either answer questions or just talk about the referendum or talk about their placement. I did about 45 individual meetings that went really, really well. And I will tell you that after looking at our educators and all the placements, that we are highly competitive in our pay schedule at every level. So if you remember, when we started this journey, we knew that we were really lagging behind other districts, especially with educators in that 3 to 15 years of experience band. And so now I would say we are at the top for all of our educators. So that's been really, really exciting. To let you know, and I just wanted to give you a personal anecdote in terms of doing the meetings. And there were also educators that met with me just to say thank you, that really didn't have questions or concerns about their placement. And so I wrote down some quotes through the process that I hoped I'd be able to share with you eventually. One teacher told me that this was life-changing for her. Another teacher said that he could now afford to buy a home in Oregon and raise his family here, and he has since bought a home in Oregon here. Many people said that they felt incredibly supported by the district and by their community. A new teacher said, "I can't explain how happy I am that I'm in this district," and he has a license that is very difficult to find, so it's exciting to know that we'll be able to keep him. And one teacher said, "I wouldn't want to work anywhere else." And so that just gives you a sample to give you another perspective to meet with me, to say thank you, and that this has really impacted her life and her baby's life, and she wanted her mom to see that perspective. And so that was really a fun meeting to have. So by and large, our educators are extremely excited by not only having an increase in their salaries, but also having a plan and a path to know what they have to do to get the top of our salary schedule. So it's been extremely, extremely impactful from a retention standpoint. In terms of professional development, we have really been focusing on multi-year sequences. So to steal a line from Jim Kleiner, to really tell educators to go narrow and deep. And we want all of the sequences to be linked to increases in student achievement. So that's really, so Leslie Bergstrom has done a great job in going to every building, having meetings with teachers to explain the sequences, really what our expectations are as a result of the referendum, and also to reassure people that we're really trying to focus on student achievement, to have lengthy and intensive professional development, to have collaboration with other instructors, because we know that that's how teachers, well, really adults, learn best. And as always, that we are linking everything to our values. And so every meeting that Leslie or I attend, we have the values up on the screen, we talk about them. I think people are starting to understand more and more where we're going as a district, what the board values, what our priorities are. So we've been very intentional about talking about that and linking our sequences back to our values. So in terms of giving you examples, we are working on developing sequences now with educators. We are working on sequences that demonstrate highly effective practices, so a lot based on Hattie's research. Also, we will have a sequence on equity because that is one of our priorities. We are in the process of working with Colleen Christensen to develop a new educator sequence so that every educator that we hire into our district would have a 2-year sequence that they would go through to understand really what our culture and values and priorities are in Oregon. And then of course, our educators are really excited about the opportunity to develop their own sequences and to learn from each other. So I put a cartoon up here that I found, which is meant to be a joke, but it really resonated with me, where he says, "I'll be happy to give you innovative thinking, but what are the guidelines?" Right? And so, but I put that up there to tell educators that we really do want your innovative thinking. We want you to develop your own sequences, but of course to have those parameters of our values and knowing what impacts student achievement. So we have a lot of instructors that are ready to go and are really excited about that path. In terms of recruitment, as I talked about throughout this process, is in the 5 years that I have been here, we hire about 40 to 50 new educators every year. Given our proximity to UW-Madison, we have a mobile population. And so looking at how do we fill those positions. And one thing that we have started to do is we've started to go to hiring fairs that the universities have offered. And so we did 2 hiring fairs last year and have now done 2 hiring fairs this year. And I will tell you from a recruitment standpoint, it is so much easier to do hiring fairs this year. We just did one on Saturday at UW-Milwaukee, and about a month ago did one at UW-Madison. And it feels a little bit weird. I never thought I'd have to do this in education, where you're at a career fair with other school districts trying to vie for people to come to you. But we have people that wait in line that talk to us at Oregon. Our story is definitely out there, especially at UW-Madison. People understand both of our referenda and know how supportive our community is. So it's been interesting to me too in the year evolution, the questions that the candidates ask. They are much more prepared in terms of talking about, what support do you have for new educators? What is your benefit package? What is your compensation schedule? And so I will tell you, in terms of this year, it's been very easy to tell the Oregon story. We talk about the excellent learning support and opportunities that teachers have, even though teachers are finishing up their education, that they're in education because they want to be lifelong learners. And so to talk about how supportive the board and the administrators are about increasing professional development and having those opportunities, candidates are really excited about that. We talk a lot about our student-centered approach. We give them the Path Forward pamphlet. So many of them tell me it's the first district they talk to that has a board that has done board papers and really lays out their vision. So that's been really exciting to talk to teachers about, because I talk with them that they have to be the right fit for us and us the right fit for them. And so it's fun to have those conversations with candidates. To have a top competitive pay schedule. Millennials especially are very focused on what their starting salary is going to be. So I talk to them about that. I talk to them about compression, which they may or may not want to hear about, but after we're done, I can tell that it makes sense to them. And they like the fact that we have a plan, that I can show them our salary schedule. They have that certainty about what they need to do to keep advancing from a salary standpoint in their career. And very importantly, what is probably my favorite thing to talk about is that I tell them, if you come to Oregon, that you will be in a community that supports you. So you have the support of your administrators, you have the support of your board, and you have demonstrated support of your community and how much this community values education. And I think more and more as teachers are educated about funding challenges in Wisconsin and the teacher shortage, that it's very important and people want to come to Oregon because of the supportive community. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for that, because it's so easy to tell our story. In terms of where we're going in the future, and these are things that I think about every day, is we know that we have to look at compensation for the 10% of our educators who are off the schedule. And by off the schedule, that's a bargaining term where the top of our schedule in the year 3 is $65,000. We do have about 10% of our staff that will be above that in year 3. And so we have to look at, how are we going to keep those veteran staff that have been in our district literally 30 to 50 years. So that's something that, we think about all the time, and we have to look at what our budget is going to be and how we're going to retain those educators. Leslie has been working very hard on this in terms of how do we continue to have educator input into the sequences and to implement best practices for professional development. So we have talked about a plan to get that feedback from educators and to make sure that they have the support that they need to implement the sequences that they're interested in. And then as always, we have to keep monitoring the Dane County market. We're definitely seeing the teacher shortage in our application pool. We've started to post positions already. We have great pools, but I want to make sure they stay that way. We have extreme interest in our plan, in our salary schedule. I have had area HR directors, Monona Grove, Verona, Middleton, Stoughton, ask about our salary schedule, want me to come and talk to them about how we implemented it, how it's working. And so I know that, those districts won't be far behind us in terms of the model that we implemented. So I know that I always have to keep an eye on the market to make sure that we are attracting and retaining the top quality educators that we have. So overall, I just want to say thank you so much for your vision and support. If you remember, this educator compensation came out as a top 5 priority in our Vision Conference 2.0. And you as a board, I know, worked very hard on it, and our community voted yes with 65% support. So overall, I just want to say thank you. It has made a huge difference, and I welcome the chance to talk to anyone about that because I'm just so appreciative. With that, I will take questions.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say that the 3 years that you spent on this committee, wow, thank you so much. It makes us very proud.
Dan, anything?
It sounds like It's turning out to be everything we'd hoped that it would be. And it just makes me feel really good about that, listening to you talk about it.
Barb, anything?
More questions?
So, we were one of the last districts in the county to come up with a comp plan, right? Which means all the other districts, their comp plans are less than 4 or 5 years old, right?
Yes.
And you're saying that some of them are already ready to change their comp plans to copy us?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
So I think part of that, and Dr. Bussler can certainly chime in here because I know you talk about it as superintendents, but we talk about that as HR directors, and I think one of the things that was a little bit frustrating for me at the time, but worked out really well, is how long it took us to implement our plan. So we had so much time to study it and find the right plan for us that I'm really thankful for that. And I think some other districts sort of implemented the plan first and now are talking about how to pay for it. And that's not a criticism of them because, you know, we have a teacher shortage and districts need to do what they need to do for them. But also our plan is the first of its kind in the state. So it's a completely different way of thinking about compensation. So when you're innovative, that can be risky, right? And so I think we took a big risk, but other districts are seeing how it's paying off for us. And as usual, you know, when you go first, if you have the right plan, then, you know, other people want to have the same plan too. So, you know, we have, I think in terms of what our new teachers make, like in those first 5 years, other districts have told me it's very hard for them to compete with that, so they're relooking at their plans.
Yeah, I had lunch with a board officer of another Dane County district today, and they're looking at changing, and they like our plan a lot. And at the convention in Milwaukee, I had another area district board president come to me and said, your plan's so simple but so effective that we're thinking about reinventing ours a little bit.
It just surprises me
Yeah.
that they'd be willing to make major changes that frequently, or do they have qualms about it?
Do you want to speak to that?
I think it's all about retention and recruitment. And if someone has a better mousetrap, you buy the better mousetrap. And I can't tell you the number of times this morning, this wasn't set up this way. I spent an hour plus on the telephone with the superintendent whose district, not a Dane County district, was really struggling with teacher compensation. And we've already sent them a copy of our plan months ago. If he asked me one question, he asked me 50 questions and wanted to know process, how do we get staff support? And right now he's facing, or his district is facing, half the staff that like it and half the staff that don't like their proposed plan. And I said, for us, one of the policy considerations, which I think was really crucial when we talked, and I suggested to the board, we should not go to referendum until we get staff support. And I said, I think that was critical in our success. And otherwise, you're going to split the staff, young versus old, experienced versus not experienced, master's versus bachelor's degree. And even though it took 3.5, almost 4 years, now looking in the rearview mirror, it was worth it for us to be patient.
Thank you. Great. Krista?
Two things. I think one, it's really interesting that if you're looking at a comp plan just in terms of pay, it's very different than I think we really looked at it in terms of professional development and teachers as learners. And so I think it's interesting when you take that approach that marries who you are as a district, it tends to be more sustainable. I think the other thing that I kind of go to now is this collaborative and what's happening in Wisconsin, urban versus rural, and districts that have things and districts that don't. And is there a role for us as a district with this plan that we can be collaborative or building bridges with other districts or potentially raising revenue in terms of helping other districts with something like this? Because if all districts have teachers that are good teachers that are learning, that are staying with them, that benefits everybody. So I kind of go there of, is there a role for the Oregon School District in this realm in the state of Wisconsin or within lesser districts in our area? I don't know, it's just a thought that, you know. We've got some good things going on here that we can help people without hurting us.
Brian, could you reiterate what the components that made this successful? Because I think there might have been a third component, and I think that the compensation and everything that you said, you know, the learner community collaboration, but I think the wage is fair too. And there were two other things that you mentioned that I can't remember, and I'm sorry. And it's okay if it's not essential. I think Krista kind of reiterated that, but I just wanted to say I think teachers are happy because of everything that's mentioned here, but I think it's a fair wage too, and there's opportunity for growth. And I think that that's really important to educators because, you know, we know that we're not going to get rich, but we certainly love our jobs.
So we had really two excellent presentations tonight for the board, but they're both related. You know, the assessment piece and the educator effectiveness ties directly in with the teacher comp thing, and it ties directly to our curriculum, and that's exactly how we wanted it, so we should feel really good about that. We've talked a little bit, and Leslie and I and Gina, about maybe doing a WASB presentation or two next year, and so we'll be monitoring when they do the call for proposals that we'll work together to share our story because we have a really good story. And the third point is, one of your last slides is, we're not done. I mean, this is not a static plan, it's a fluid plan, and Gina and I have talked about that top 10%, and there is a piece in the plan to compensate them, you know, when they level off there, but we need to keep evaluating that component and make sure we're competitive there, and what we can do. So we'll keep working on that and monitoring it as we go. So that's the nice thing about our plan. It's easy to move pieces a little bit because it's so flexible. Okay, thank you, Gina. All right, that takes us to superintendent's report. Brian, floor is yours.
I have a couple of things. First, I wanted to confirm with everyone, we have our board tour of Oregon High School on March 9th, Thursday, March 9th at 4:30. And if we plan to meet in the new academic wing, we will start and do a walkthrough there. And then we will head south, right? Yeah, south towards the new, towards the new administrative offices and the physical education area. So
Will we get to see Oasis too?
Yes.
Okay.
yes, because Oasis finally was, all of the exterior wrap around the building has been removed. So you can see it from Highway 14, or you can drive up to the back of the high school and take a look. And it stands out a little bit, which is sort of a feature design element that Nathan and Steve Cunin placed into our structure. So if you haven't seen it, it will catch your eye.
And it's 4:30, correct?
4:30.
Thank you.
Next item, we are almost ready to go to print on our February and March newsletter. I've been working with Findorf on our construction newsletter, and Steve gave some feedback and advice to also include a page on recent district accomplishments. So we have a page in the newsletter on recent district accomplishments. You'll recognize some of these accomplishments. I won't give them all away tonight. One is our 99% graduation rate for the class of 2006. Addressing our success with the school construction project, underscoring our strategic plan on the path forward, our success with the educator compensation plan, and I won't go into all of them, so you read it when it comes out.
Just a teaser.
Just a teaser, just enough. So we're excited about that. Last week I received a document that I thought you all might be interested in, so Janie and I have ordered a copy for you. It's ACP in the state of Wisconsin. This is a report that the Department of Public Instruction put together. It is a quick read that is less than 30 pages.
What is
So, ACP.
What does that mean?
Academic
It's the career
Gotcha.
planning project that the state's been involved in and that we have been working on for I'll say 3 years now, but they put together a really nice summary for us. Steve already mentioned that last week Jeff and Steve and I and Jim Rickaball met to talk about a vision steering committee proposal. And at the center of that proposal is a book that Jim wrote a few years ago, and it's called 5 Levers to Improve Learning. If you haven't picked up a copy of the book, Janie has a copy with your name on it. It's actually a pretty quick read, less than 200 some pages, and we are hoping to bring back an idea. I don't know if we will be ready in March, but we will certainly be ready in the month of April to bring back an idea for the Vision Steering Committee. Today was a professional development day in the district. I will highlight 4 main pieces, and in this week's update, I'll give you some more information. First, from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock today, all of our K-12 subject teachers met to review curriculum. So all the buildings, I'll say, got together and locked out that time so teachers could meet to review curriculum. After that, there were school-specific topics for the balance of the day, and a few of our teachers spent time in subject area committee work or working on math and language arts meetings. So we think those days, like today with professional development, are so important, and the whole notion isn't to have them at the beginning of the year or to have them at the end of the year, but to embed them throughout the year so the learning that our staff has, they can translate that right into the classroom. As Steve asked a question earlier about the boundary hearing with the Department of Public Instruction, I met last week with the petitioner from the Albany School District. They have until March 15th to file their appeal. Usually I would say everyone files an appeal, but the cost to file an appeal is $750. So you do have some financial skin in the game, so to speak, before you go to appeal.
Brian, I'm assuming that Albany said no?
Yes, Albany
Okay.
denied their request. And again, this property was really small. It's an undeveloped property. Had about $90,000 worth of tax base value right now. I do think there's a real legitimate case based on those criteria, and as you know, our board approved it, so we will keep our eye on that, and if the petitioners decide to go forward, we'll spend some time working with them and attending the boundary appeal hearing. Usually those hearings are set for the last week, either the 3rd or 4th week in April, so I will keep you posted on that. I hope you appreciated and enjoyed listening to what I'll call our 3 presentations as much as I did tonight. The work from the Mental Health Task Force, and Leslie and Candace, I've led that task force along with our school staff and a few community members. It's nice to see that mental health work coming together and being able to work with Dane County to spread our resources and bring, in essence, school social workers into our schools. Secondarily, the EE work, I feel old when I look at educator effectiveness because we have been working on it, Leslie, I think 6 years?
Since 2012, I think.
Yes, it has been a long time, and one of the critical strategic decisions that we made with your support was the ability to allow us to participate in the teacher educator effectiveness pilot and the principal educator effectiveness pilot. We received a ton of free professional development where we sent teachers as well as administrators to DPI workshops across the state, and we really had a leg up. I know some districts are really struggling with educator effectiveness, largely because they've only been in it for a couple of years. We had revised our teacher job description based on the Danielson model about 7 or 8 years ago, and that was really the impetus when we started working with Charlotte Danielson's work. And we were pure with Charlotte Danielson's work. We weren't using it from an evaluative method. We were using it in order to improve classroom practice, instructional strategy, and student achievement, which is really the way she had designed it. And then lastly, I continue to be overwhelmed and impressed with our work with our teacher compensation and educator compensation plan. What we've been able to do, even though it took a long, long time, 3.5, almost 4 years, has now put us at really the cutting edge with a teacher compensation plan. And today, I shared with Gina, Leslie and I finished a round 2 interview that our dear friend in Brooklyn, Carrie Majeski, got us started. We had our first 17-18 hire that occurred today, so we are off and running. Only Carrie would get us started. Well, usually there's snow on the ground, but she is filling our calendar with interviews, and it's exciting to be in that time of the year to look at positions. We want to close out and have a really strong end of the 16-17 school year, but to be able to look ahead and knowing that we're going to hire probably in 40 to maybe 50 teachers this year. The earlier we can get started, the better it is, so we can spread our time over the next several months. So the work that has come out of our educator, our teacher compensation plan has been critically important. It's mission sensitive work, and to know that we didn't have it planned, but when we went to our 2015 visioning conference and educator compensation was a top 5 priority, I believed that to be a very good indicator for when we finally would get a plan ready for our community to vote on. So I hope you are as happy about those 3 presentations as I am this evening. And with that, I will stop.
Thank you. Board checkout. We have closing. We have future agenda. Janie put at your desk a draft agenda for the March 13th meeting. One thing you'll notice is that we're starting to put the mission statement on every agenda, just to reemphasize that we are here for the purpose of helping students acquire the skills, knowledge, and attitudes needed to achieve their individual potential, and everything we do as a board should be guided toward that. But on the back, we've got a budget guideline overview, so we'll hear a report from Andy. We'll have a committee report from policy and visioning, because they will, well, you will not have met by then. So we'll get the same report on this tonight, right? Okay. Information items, we're gonna talk about capital projects, the math curriculum, and anybody have anything else for the agenda that evening? If you have anything, please contact me. Check out Jeff? Barb?
Nothing.
Krista?
Happy birthday to Barb.
Yes. Happy birthday, Barb. And another
You
one.
get to go to a board meeting on your birthday?
Yeah.
Like great.
Awesome.
One?
I had an
Last
annual
week
meeting
I
on my birthday
attended,
once.
not a course, but a lecture by Julia Mead, who is Dr. Julie Mead from UW-Madison, and she's a national expert on charter and voucher schools, and it was a really good, concise, very clear lecture, and I thought it was well worth my time. And then I also had the opportunity to go visit Knox College, a small liberal arts college, a week ago, and to visit my niece, and it was just so nice to be see that holistic thing happening at a very small school. And then 3 things, and I apologize. I just spent the last 2 months putting together illustrations for poetry, and I just hung them up at the Firefly. I invite you all to see them. There you go. Thank you.
Great.
And once again, thank you for all the hard work for the compensation thing. I think it's just, it's wonderful.
Great, thanks. The board has scheduled an executive session. We'll meet in the Fishbowl Conference Room. Oh, Dan, I'm sorry. Dan.
Thanks. So, I just wanted to say something that crossed my mind today as I was meeting with someone in my office. They told me that they were a teacher, or used to be a teacher, and I always try to say thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you serve as a teacher, or you served as a teacher, because it is a public service, and I really see it as that. And the only reason that I started thinking about it that way is because as a member of the military, people have come up to me and said, thank you for your service. And I appreciate that as well. So just to keep in the idea that we are really responsible for not only the students, primarily their education and their well-being, but the teachers are a big part of that. And a lot of teachers have felt over the some years that they haven't been appreciated in a larger sense. I don't think that many of them would say that this district doesn't appreciate them, because I think it's obvious that we do, and the reactions especially that we're getting from the community in our referendum, and also from the teachers who are interviewing with us or showing interest in our district. But so if you feel like it, I encourage you, when you meet someone that's a teacher, thank them, because everybody can use that.
Thanks, Dan. Good words. We have an executive session now scheduled. We'll meet in the fishbowl. If we could go right down there, the goal will be out by no later than 9. The board will not be returning to open session. So we are done with open session material, and the board will move down there now. You let us in as we wander down.